Now, here are Morgan Streetman and Roxanne Wilder.
Well, hello. We know we have some serious tragic news to get to and discuss. But before we go there, Morgan, I do want to say happy belated birthday to you.
Thank you so much. And I've got a little special present here that I was waiting to open on the air. So let me see, what have I got here as I unruffle the bag a little bit.
I'm going to do your card for you, too, because that's kind of part of it, too. But.
Yes. Oh, my favorite. Oh, my very, very favorite beverage. Thank you so much. As you well know, the toasted...
We like to keep everybody hydrated. Your favorite beverage. Keep you hydrated.
This is perfect summer hydration right here. Oh, and a date.
And go ahead and hold that up to the mic if you can when you open that. Yeah.
Nice. I thought it felt like a particularly thick card. That's because there's a small audio player included in the card.
There's a Bluetooth, too, if you want to stream other music through it. Yes.
That is so awesome.
That's for you, Morgan Streetman, for your birthday.
Well, thank you all so much. Well, thank you. It is a special day, and had a great time. Enjoyed spending some time with my parents this weekend.
Oh, good.
And right before my dad goes out, he's out on the road now. He got a new position, so he's out.
Wow.
Yeah, he's out at a medical conference in California this week.
Good for him.
Yeah, pretty excited about all that for him. So I got to spend a little time with him and my mom on Saturday. And of course, Mom always makes the greatest food for me. I mean, she made this great pot roast, and we had banana pudding, which is my traditional birthday cake replacement because, I like birthday cakes. They're all right, but I really like banana pudding.
Isn't that nice when you can make your special request for your desserts for your birthday? It's whatever you want on the menu, right?
That's right. Today's my day, and we're having banana pudding.
But that banana pudding, do you have vanilla wafers in it?
Oh, yeah. Nilla wafers.
There you go.
Nilla wafers and whipped cream on top.
Ooh.
Make this Mississippi boy happy.
Yes.
Well, and I was having such a good time on Saturday, and then, kind of middle of the day, somebody hollered out, "Hey, did you see there's this thing that happened in El Paso, Texas?" Which is this terrible Walmart shooting, and I don't even know if he made it into because the Walmart is in like a big complex where there's also a mall.
Right.
I couldn't tell if he actually made it over into the mall.
Yeah, they said he was walking down the aisles.
Wow. But at the Walmart.
Right, at the Walmart.
Okay, but did he get over to the mall?
I don't
think he made it to the mall, but just Walmart.
Okay, but they just had a lot of people then in the mall who they had to evacuate and everything else because we saw some of those videos. And I saw even videos from inside the Walmart.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there were people that drive, 4 hours from Mexico coming over the border to shop at that Walmart.
Well, El Paso, it's right, right on the border there.
I have a tough time reading the stories, but you hear about the stories of, just heroic efforts. A mom saving her 2-month-old child, jumping in front of the baby, dying. That's, it's just
and her husband.
Gut-wrenching. Yeah, to read about. Her husband passed as well?
Yep.
Ugh.
Yeah, brother-in-law said that today, that his brother, who was the husband of the girl that, covered the baby, the 2-month-old.
Mm-hmm. So these are, it just, not only do you feel for these people, their families, but also you have that sense of, hey, this could happen anywhere, I shop, I go to a bar, I've been to bars, and so that's how all of our collective national psyche feels right now.
Yeah.
Senseless copycat.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, senseless copycat. I mean, we don't even know what the motive was. I personally don't think. I'm not accepting of what the media has tried to jump right to the conclusion of, although perhaps the guy in El Paso, and, we were kind of talking pre-show about this, and, of the two, he seems like, okay, there's the potential that there's some kind of racism or white supremacy there, although I think it's kind of a mixed bag. I did not, I have read those manifestos before. It's pretty tough to do, I have to say. It's tough to kind of sit there and slog through. Mm-hmm. You don't even know, let's be honest, we don't even know for sure that it's what the person wrote, as opposed to something somebody created maybe beforehand or after the fact to post the next time one of these things happens.
And clearly it's not a sane person.
Yeah, it's kind of the ramblings of a mad person. But it seemed like the guy in El Paso's manifesto, which I think is the only one of the two who, supposedly a manifesto was posted, it was kind of a mixed bag. In other words, there were portions of it that were railing on corporations, portions of it that were talking about the environment, and I think it's a real shame that we have such a rush to politicize these shootings every single time. And that's kind of and now we've got and Pat, you're showing us the president is now speaking, and he was going to give an address starting.
Are on the ground, and I have directed them to provide any and all assistance required, whatever is needed. The shooter in El Paso posted a manifesto online consumed by racist hate. In one voice, our nation must condemn racism, bigotry, and white supremacy. These sinister ideologies must be defeated. Hate has no place in America. Hatred warps the mind, ravages the heart, and devours the soul. We have asked the FBI to identify all further resources they need to investigate and disrupt hate crimes and domestic terrorism, whatever they need. We must recognize that the Internet has provided a dangerous avenue to radicalize disturbed minds and perform demented acts. We must shine light on the dark recesses of the Internet and stop mass murders before they start. The Internet, likewise, is used for human trafficking, illegal drug distribution, and so many other heinous crimes. The perils of the Internet and social media cannot be ignored, and they will not be ignored. In the 2 decades since Columbine, our nation has watched with rising horror and dread as one mass shooting has followed another, over and over again, decade after decade. We cannot allow ourselves to feel powerless. We can and will stop this evil contagion. In that task, we must honor the sacred memory of those we have lost by acting as one people. Open wounds cannot heal if we are divided. We must seek real bipartisan solutions. We have to do that in a bipartisan manner that will truly make America safer and better for all. First, we must do a better job of identifying and acting on early warning signs. I am directing the Department of Justice to work in partnership with local, state, and federal agencies, as well as social media companies, to develop tools that can detect mass shooters before they strike. As an example, the monster in the Parkland High School in Florida had many red flags against him, and yet nobody took decisive action. Nobody did anything. Why not? Second, we must stop the glorification of violence in our society. This includes the gruesome and grisly video games that are now commonplace. It is too easy today for troubled youth to surround themselves with a culture that celebrates violence. We must stop or substantially reduce this, and it has to begin immediately. Cultural change is hard, but each of us can choose to build a culture that celebrates the inherent worth and dignity of every human life. That's what we have to do. Third, we must reform our mental health laws to better identify mentally disturbed individuals who may commit acts of violence and make sure those people not only get treatment, but when necessary, involuntary confinement. Mental illness and hatred pulls the trigger, not the gun. Fourth, we must make sure that those judged to pose a grave risk to public safety do not have access to firearms, and that if they do, those firearms can be taken through rapid due process. That is why I have called for red flag laws, also known as extreme risk protection orders. Today, I'm also directing the Department of Justice to propose legislation ensuring that those who commit hate crimes and mass murders face the death penalty. and that this capital punishment be delivered quickly, decisively, and without years of needless delay. These are just a few of the areas of cooperation that we can pursue. I am open and ready to listen and discuss all ideas that will actually work and make a very big difference. Republicans and Democrats have proven that we can join together in a bipartisan fashion to address this plague. Last year, we enacted the Stop School Violence and Fix NICS Act.
You're listening
into law,
live to the president's
providing grants to
address on the shooting.
schools.
We'll be right back.
And we're back on the Morgan Streetman Show, and you were just listening to President Donald Trump's live address to the nation, speaking following El Paso and Dayton shootings. And I'll give you my opinion on it, but Morgan, first I want to hear your opinion. What did you think of what he said?
Well, I think, one, I was surprised. Well, right when I got done saying, I wasn't, I am not convinced by the rush to call everybody a racist. That's kind of an overarching theme that I see in all political discussions. So I'm reticent to buy into the media telling us these guys are racist. Now, as soon as I get done saying that, of course, then we flip over to the president, and he's saying they're racist. Well, I guess if the president's saying it, it's pretty. It must be the case. I mean, I don't know, but the point is, I think he's right to point out the mental health aspects, whether the people are racist or not racist. The mental health aspects are what are driving these mass shootings. And, if we look at some of the mass shootings historically, many of them, from Sandy Hook to, all the way back to the Columbine shootings, many of these shooters, apparently the Aurora shootings, are all on these mind-altering drugs that are for people who have depression and other issues. But apparently these drugs are very, very powerful. They have very powerful effects on the mind, and they don't affect everybody the same way. So by and large, it seems like they probably help people with depression. Mm-hmm. Maybe most people that take the antidepressants and other drugs are helped by them. But, I mean, if you ever watch any of those drug commercials and you hear the side effects, potential side effects, they're pretty serious. And so you've got things like suicidal ideation, homicidal thoughts you'll hear on some of these antidepressants when they used to be a little bit more heavy in advertising those on television. And, a lot of these folks wind up being under psychiatric treatment and on heavy-duty psychiatric drugs. And I think we've just got to take a real hard look at that. I mean, are these drugs really helping everybody? Apparently there are swaths of the population that can take them, and they're not helped by them.
Well, I think everybody has different brain chemistry. So when you start doling out prescriptions, I think there's some guesswork involved.
Yeah.
You don't know how it's going to react.
It's kind of a trial and error, right?
Sure. And then you also have people, and by the way, we're having this discussion as a broad mental health discussion, but we don't know any of the situations as far as these two individuals. But it's something where it has to be monitored. And then is someone taking these medications the way that they're supposed to take them?
Well, that's true, too.
You know what a chilling fact is? There's been 250 mass shootings in the United States so far this year.
Mm-hmm.
I heard that.
And this is only the 217th day of the year.
Yeah, I've heard that, but you look at how they're defining mass shooting,
right.
though.
That's exactly what I want to bring up, mass. What does mass mean? Because I don't remember this many mass shootings. I remember shootings where it could have been a disgruntled person going after a wife and killing a couple. Is that considered mass?
I mean, we've had a few shootings, right? I mean, there was a shooting February 15th of this year in Aurora, Illinois, where 5 people were killed. That was involving a factory worker basically shooting up a manufacturing plant. May 31st in Virginia Beach, 12 people were killed. There again, you've got a guy going back to where he worked and shooting up his work. We've got the shooting, obviously, in El Paso. Which one were you saying?
I was thinking Gilcroy. Was that?
Right, the Gilroy Garlic Festival.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, good call. That was just
California just a couple weeks ago.
Yeah. In theory, there was a mass shooting in Chicago also over the weekend where 7 people shot in a park late Saturday morning or late Saturday evening, early Sunday morning.
A drive-by.
Yeah, it was shot out of a Camaro, and 7 people were injured. I don't think anyone has died from that, but that could be, in theory, also a mass shooting. So you got to look at how they're defining it. it is sort of interesting that the shooting in Chicago, where 7 people were shot, didn't get hardly any mainstream news play, as is the case with most shootings in Chicago, which are pretty regular events in the city of Chicago, one of the most violent cities in the country, kind of like Baltimore,
Dallas,
New Orleans. These are some of the worst places in terms of murder rates, Houston, that you can live in the whole country.
So listening to President Trump speak, I tried to think from the perspective of someone, okay, forget about the people who like him. They're going to like whatever he says. But if you look at the other 2 groups, the people who hate him, well, they're going to hate whatever he just had to say. And then if you look at the people who are kind of in the middle, although he is so polarizing, so I don't know who those people are. But when you listen to what he has to say, I think he addressed the things that you really needed to, i.e., he did talk about gun control. He did talk about mental health. He did talk about hate and white nationalism. So I think he hit everything that he needed to. And that's kind of what I want to see from a politician. The disappointing thing to me over the last couple of days is to watch people from both parties get on, stand up and just make this a political point. That's not what we need to do. We need to come together and put political viewpoints aside and try to solve a problem.
Yeah. Well, I think one of our issues that we have when doing all of that is that this is such a difficult problem to solve. We can't even really get our minds around what the problem is. And I would say that it could be a different problem in each individual person's, situation. I mean, one could be a mental health issue. One, I guess, could be a racism issue. There's could be all kinds of different things going on. And even then, not all problems have just a single cause. There may be multiple things going on. One thing I will say is a theme, at least this came out of the Dayton, Ohio shooters background. And we haven't done a lot of talking about that individual, Connor Betts. But if you looked into his background, he was heavy duty into some types of music that are very dark, called death metal. They have some very dark themes. In fact, of course, he was killed within about a minute of starting his shooting, which is amazingly fast.
But also amazingly distressing and sad that he was able to kill that many people in that short amount of time. Yeah.
Well, and the first one he killed was his sister. So that that couldn't have been an accident. He couldn't have just showed up at the same place his sister was accidentally. He must have targeted her and then whoever else was around when he was.
Yeah, they did go there together, and she went.
They went
walking.
together.
Yeah, and she went walking off another part of the store. So I think when the shooting started, she might have come back and he shot her then. But they said they separated in the store.
Well, wait, but we're talking about the guy at the bar in Dayton, though. Was there a store involved there too?
The store that was in Dayton. They separated.
Okay.
Yeah, the store was kind of a store. It was a
So they
eatery.
stopped at a store near the bars. I got you. And then he started shooting, and she came back out of the store, and he shot her.
Right.
Wow. Well, you look at, there's some pictures of him, and he's got some patches on. One of the patches in one of his pictures says, "Against all gods." You look at some of the things that he has posted on his Twitter feed. One, he was an Antifa supporter, and what he self-described, we'll put it that way, self-described leftist, and he wanted to vote for Elizabeth Warren, he said.
And again, we have to take it with a grain of salt because we don't know what fake accounts or whatever could be created from any of these people.
Yeah, my understanding, yes, absolutely. And who knows if they're even trying to throw you off the trail. But at least with the Dayton, Ohio, I don't see white supremacism in his background. What I see is a leftist who is also a Satanist, avowed Satanist. In fact, the sweatshirt, I don't know if you guys heard this, but the sweatshirt that he was wearing said, "No heart to feel, no soul to steal." And apparently that's a line from a death metal band. I did go out there and find the band and listen to about 10 seconds of one of their songs. I know there are people that like that kind of music. I find that stuff completely unlistenable. I mean, and I like Metallica. Believe me, I like Metallica, but I can't listen to that death metal stuff. It's just too much over the top. It's not musical to me. But anyway, that's what he was listening to, and that's the band that he was following.
And the Dayton shooter, he also, a lot of people came out and said, "Oh, no, we never saw this coming. He seemed like a nice kid." Some people said that he didn't have anything in his background that would have prevented him from purchasing the rifle that he bought. But then classmates came out and said, wait a second, this kid was suspended during the junior year at high school for making a hit list of people he wanted to kill and a list of people he wanted to rape. So it's just, and it goes into detail as to, according to these former students or classmates of his, what may have followed, what kind of investigation followed and how that was resolved. He was back at school eventually. But it brings up the question, when you have, I mean, we have those protective rights when someone is a minor, certain things are kept sealed, and you kind of say, okay, they're 18 now, let's do a fresh start. But what kinds of things do we need to start to keep in a file for, hey, this person was 16 or 17 and they did these types of things. Is this going to bleed over into their adult life? Do we have a mental illness issue here?
Right. Well, you know how we've long said that you need to watch out for those young kids that like to hurt animals.
Exactly.
And a lot of times they will become the serial killers or mass murderers of the future. So there is something tied to, if you're in youth or adolescence and you're behaving in a certain way and you're demonstrating that you don't have any human empathy, we've got to really, maybe you should be marked. I mean, you certainly should be given an opportunity to learn those things and come back from that. But maybe we ought to keep a little tickler on you to say, hey, we need to be watching this person. If they go out and make any strange, large purchases of guns and ammunition, maybe we need to go and have somebody go by and talk to them and just try to find out what's going on with them and then have trained professionals, not just beat law enforcement or beat police officers. We're going to talk about that some more. We'll be right back.
And we're back on the Morgan Streetman Show after just a terrible, terrible weekend for our country. And we're trying to sift through this. And, we can ask questions, Morgan, all day long. Why? Why does this happen? And we don't know. Like you said earlier, sometimes it's an individual thing.
Well, we're getting a lot of different, these things just happened. We are trying our best to look into it, but that's not the easiest thing to do because we don't know whether, everybody's living today, their online lives are contrived. Generally, that we can accept that. So, you might post on Facebook a picture of you smiling and, having a great time, on vacation or something. And then the reality is everybody that's there with you and your family on vacation, y'all are all fighting like a bunch of cats and dogs, but everybody smile for the picture so we can put on a good face.
And you're mad about the service and the food isn't good. Yes.
Yeah. And let everybody, sort of, pretend so that we don't let on to anyone online what's really going on with us. So we have to kind of, I think, look at the postings by some of these people, some of these shooters, in the same sort of light that they may have been at some level putting on. But, we got into something just right before the break that was interesting, and that's with respect to the Dayton, Ohio shooter, that when he was in high school, he had been discovered as being, a potentially violent person, I would say. He made up a hit list of his classmates. Apparently, at some point, he went into the school bathroom. I assume they probably have more than one, but one of the school bathrooms and wrote on the wall his hit list. And that's what actually caused the school to kind of be locked down. It's my understanding that the and I don't know if it was the principal or the assistant principal, but that he was asked about this. And I read in one of the interviews somewhere on one of the Ohio papers, and he said basically, look, I don't really want to comment on it, but I wouldn't deny that statement. So, he was essentially confirming the fact that, there was this incident in high school with this kid where he wrote a hit list on the wall. Now, apparently he received some counseling after that, which you would think, would be mandatory, that you'd have to get some kind of counseling. And there'd be maybe some effort to evaluate you as to, okay, was this kid serious? Was this kind of a cry for help? Was he just acting out? Is he being bullied? To me, you would think that the administration would want some sort of analysis of what's really going on with this kid. He's a junior, right? So he's going to be there for a full another year at least. So, and apparently they did something. They had a counselor come in and meet with him, and his classmates said that after that he seemed very normal and kind of got back to normal. Obviously, he was probably covering.
Well, you bring that point up too. It's like if you try to identify someone as having a mental illness, and then if they're mentally ill and also sociopathic, then they're able to act like everything is fine.
Sure, right. They can pretend. Like all the psychopaths that the Ted Bundys of the world who can walk around and pull it off, pretend to be normal people when in reality they're mass murderers and terrible people. So, and you get, to me, I think you got to look at the satanic aspect of it, at least the guy in Dayton, Ohio. I mean, these people have, something that President Trump said during his remarks, caught my ear, and that is about the sanctity and the dignity of human life. I don't know that he said it exactly like that, but he said things like that before, particularly when he's talked about abortion, that every human being is created in the holy image of God and things like that. And the move away from recognizing that as a society, as a group, we do not acknowledge God. We don't reference God. We don't talk about human beings as being created in God's image. The move away from that has caused a decline in the value of human life and the value that we all feel towards other humans. We should respect human life as a gift from God. It's essentially above our pay grade, not to be taken away by us. It's for God to decide who lives and who dies. But people have gotten rid of God and moved God out of public life and out of their lives individually. And, the result is that you could feel comfortable that it would be anywhere within the realm of appropriate to go and kill other people. I mean, how could you be comfortable with that? I mean, seriously, how could you just feel okay about that?
Morals are all out of whack.
Morals are out of whack.
They're just gone.
They're totally gone. And obviously people don't feel the idea of thou shalt not kill. They think, well, why not? This person is in my way, or they believe something that I don't believe.
Life value is not there like it used to be. I mean, it's so easy to just, I killed somebody.
Well, and think about the idea of the violence reaction that we've got to all these political issues. And that comes with some of the Antifa groups.
Right.
I mean, they have seriously injured people. I don't know if they've killed anybody, but they've seriously injured people, certainly attacked them in different situations and things, physically attacked them. I'm thinking of a video that I saw where a guy whacks a guy on the head and you can hear his head crack like a coconut, hits him with a baton. I mean, that was about a year ago from one of these Antifa, demonstrations.
And we've heard this argument before, and I think sometimes it is a little bit silly to say, oh my gosh, there's so much violence in video games or in TV and on movies, because you can have somebody watch a very violent show and they're not going to react to it in any way whatsoever, except, okay, they know it, take it for entertainment value. But I do think we are in an increasingly media-driven, violent world, because I notice now as a parent, I'm constantly, if it's commercials, there's all kinds of stuff. I'm turning the television off because it's too violent.
Yeah. Well, and it's just a constant stream of it.
Well, what about this one? Violent games started. When they first started out there and parents were in the uproar when they saw the shooting and the blood and things like that. It's now they've accepted that.
Sure they have. Yeah,
they've
that's
allowed
considered.
That to continue.
Right. I mean, I saw a guy being, just to kind of put a point on this, I saw a guy being interviewed, and I think it was in El Paso. He was one of the alleged bystanders. He seemed pretty polished to me. But anyway, he had on a Deadpool shirt. And if you know what Deadpool is, Deadpool's a comic book character. Now, I have to confess, I have not seen the Deadpool movies, but I get the idea of it. He can't be killed no matter what happens to him. And he kills a lot of other people, and they're just incredibly violent movies with a lot of people.
And he's very GQ.
And he's very GQ, and it's almost a comedy. It's like a violent comedy. He make a joke out of everything. And our
American
brains are,
Psycho was like that too with Christian Bale. Remember that movie?
Great example. Absolutely, I do. Right? It glorified the American Psycho. It glorified this idea of living the secret life. And, of course, in that particular movie, I'm not even really sure if that stuff was happening or if he was just imagining it and writing it in his journal or, that was a real psychological play on that. But you're exactly right. People develop a comfort level with this. And the only way you could have that is by not believing that there was a God who's going to hold you accountable at the end of the world. And I know a lot of people think that's silly, maybe an old-fashioned idea. But, it also had some value, whether you believe it or not, in keeping people oriented towards a certain morality, towards a certain idea that, you are responsible to an authority figure, not just a human authority figure, but a cosmic authority figure for what you do And so you should live accordingly because you're going to be rewarded or you're going to be punished based on, the things that you do in this life. And, I think that we've lost something with that, with the divorce of religion from our public life, the inability to talk about religion, the disrespect that's afforded to God in our public life. I think the dividends that pays are what we're experiencing right now. I don't think this comes from the gun culture because you know what? We've had a gun culture in this country for many years. We've had tens and even hundreds of millions of firearms in the country for many years. A very well-armed populace for almost the entirety of this nation. And these mass shootings are a newer phenomenon. These, particularly the ones done by young people. I mean, these tend to be younger people, at least the ones that are making the news here. Again, we're not hearing about the sort of mass shootings in Chicago, but those are probably done, one would guess, by fairly young people as well. But they're done by young people, who have no connection to God, to religion, who've played these violent video games. Your brain is very plastic, and the images that you see, then the audio, the words that you hear, can essentially reprogram your brain over time. And so if you sit there and play Grand Theft Auto all day, every day for, 3-4 weeks, you are reprogramming your brain to be you're becoming the guy that you see on the video screen. That's becoming you as you continue to just plug into this world and embrace that. And then you bring it out and you bring it into the real world. And these folks behave very much like people behave in the Grand Theft Auto video games. In fact, I think the Dayton guy, there was even some talk about that he had played a bunch of video games when he was younger, and he had even given himself the name hostage killer. Because for him, what he said was one of the most fun things and one of the most hilarious things he could do in a video game would be in a video game where you were supposed to go and save a bunch of hostages.
I didn't read this.
He said you would the best thing to do then is just round them all up and then look them right in the eye as you execute them in the video game. Now, obviously, you aren't going to get any video game points for that, but I guess what I'm saying is these video games almost encourage you, particularly the ones that are kind of this open universe idea of you can do anything you want to do within the context of this video game. It almost encourages you to try it out. Hey, you want to just go kill somebody? You want to know what that might feel like? Just go do it. Why not? And then very little happens to you in the game because of that.
Well, this entire country can talk all they want about this, but we are nowhere close to this ever being over for a long time ahead of us.
Yeah.
That's sad. Well, I feel like, too, something we haven't talked about because we've kind of come at this from all different angles. And by the way, we're just making educated guesses based on little things that we've read covering these, biographies about these two heinous people. Mm-hmm. You've got whatever they're exposed to from a media standpoint. You've got, obviously, the mental illness, the psychosis, the truly horrific, evil person. But another thing that isn't talked about that may apply, may not apply, is that loneliness factor. So you have this, I don't want to say generation, but because it's obviously there are a lot of wonderful people, but you have this sort of type of person who's doing these things, and they usually are an isolated person, whether it is or isn't because of video games.
Yeah, I saw some kind of a study that said 20% of millennials don't have any friends.
I saw that same study, yes.
And that disconnectedness from other humanity can lead you to losing your human empathy.
I bet.
And then, does it seem reasonable, particularly if you're lonely and you're angry, does it seem reasonable? Okay, fine. Well, if I can't have a good life, then nobody can. I'm just going to shoot the place up. Is that I don't know. Is that the mentality? I think that's something we have to be worried about. And as a big picture thing, our culture needs to embrace the sanctity of life, which we have not done for many, many decades now. So to me, that's what it all comes back to as a starting point, is not embracing the sanctity of human life. Well, very sad stories, folks. Thanks for sticking with us. We're going to come back, and then we'll go out there.
Welcome back to the Morgan Streetman Show. We are going to go out there. But Morgan, we also have something we need to look back at
Well, yeah, we wanted to just mention to you folks, because we've spent most of today talking about the shootings, but we wanted to just keep up with some of our regular stories. A couple of stories. One, we won't get to do it justice, but John Ratcliffe's pulled his, candidacy for the Director of National Intelligence. That happened last week. He was under a lot of pressure and wasn't getting any support from the Republican senators. In fact, I think they weren't even calling him back, and so I think it was just decided that his nomination was probably going to be doomed, and it was going to be a 2 or 3 month debacle, and so they decided to pull that. Another story we didn't really get to today that I did at least want to mention was what happened with the Fed last week on Wednesday, which is where they dropped the Fed funds rate by 25 basis points, which is 0.25%. And, you would think that would create some kind of a little bit of a market rally, but instead today we see that the Dow is crashing back below 26,000. It's in fact down 1,500 points from when Powell made his announcement. So you also look at gold and silver, and both of those are shooting higher. I mean, gold's at $1,467 right now and moving up. It may get to $1,500 in the next couple of days. I mean, it's moving that fast right now. So it's been bouncing in the $1,400 to $1,500 range now for a little while, but gold is on an uptrend. Mm-hmm. So all these signs are indicating that we could be having some economic troubles right around the corner. And of course, as folks that listen to this show know well, we are overdue for a cyclical recession. So we ought to expect that at some point, we're on borrowed time. I mean, it's going to happen. Mm-hmm. Nothing lasts forever. These things are cyclical, particularly because of the pump and dump monetary system that we've created. I mean, if you look, that's when the boom-bust cycle started, was with the creation of the Federal Reserve in 1913.
And they said when this one happens, it's going to make the 2008 one look like a picnic.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the truth is we never really had the full downturn in 2008 because they dropped the interest rates so low to try to counterbalance the economic downturn. They basically made it free to borrow money. Mm-hmm. And believe me, lots of people borrowed a bunch of money, and a bunch of money was put out into the world at that time. Well, okay, so let's go out there now, because I know folks are probably anxious to hear, okay, how are we going to go out there now at this point? We've been out there the whole show with all these shootings and stuff, and it really is hard to believe some of those shooting things. But I think this ties in nicely with it, and it also ties in somewhat with the Jeffrey Epstein story, and that is the idea that some of the elites and particularly financially wealthy people many times seem to get into some kind of devil worship or Satanism or something like that. I mean, there seems to be this theme that runs through elitism where they get very dark and negative. They embrace negative energies. And so this is a story that actually goes back, I don't know, a little over a month, but I thought it was newsworthy, so I put it in my little queue here for a future out there, that when we would come around to it, when we'd finally get a free week where we could use just one from the queue. And this is about a mysterious altar, an altar like for sacrifices, that was unearthed in Holyrood Park, which is in Scotland. Now you got to check this out, because you want to see a picture of this altar. I mean, I couldn't believe how detailed the altar is. If you look at it, I mean, it's really something else. You can find the pictures of this in the Scotsman paper, and the article is entitled "Mysterious Altar Unearthed in Holyrood Park, Most Likely Used by Pagans, Not Devil Worshippers." And basically they found this triangle of grass. And, oh, this is interesting. There's sort of a triangle of grass, and they were able to pick that triangle up, and lo and behold, underneath it is this altar. Now, this is, like I mentioned, in Scotland. It's on Winnie Hill up above St. Margaret's Loch, and it's kind of near the ruins of St. Anthony's Chapel. It's actually on a hill up above the chapel. Now, this probably doesn't mean a lot to folks here in the U.S., but it's a place in Scotland near one of the Queen's properties. And so they found this, and this altar actually depicts two figures, a male figure with horns and a female figure who's in a surrender pose, kind of falling into the male figure's power. And this is set within a pentagram. You know what a pentagram is? It's a 5-pointed star inside of a circle. And so, it basically it's the Baphomet, if you want to just, break it down and you know what that is. They're calling it the horned god, but if you look at it, it basically looks like a picture of the devil, and then you see the woman's kind of like falling beneath the devil, kind of under his power, so to speak. Now, they apparently called in specialists to check this out because they're very concerned about, okay, now is this paganism or is this devil worship? Now, when I was growing up, that wasn't two different things, right? I mean, that's at least the way I knew it. I mean, at least in Mississippi, paganism was devil worship, at least as far as I was aware. So I don't necessarily believe this is a distinction with a difference. It may be a distinction without a difference. But they said that, this basically, they brought in the experts and they said, no, this is pagan because it depicts the horned god and the goddess of water. There are a number of rune stones embedded in the concrete triangle around the plaque, as well as a number of small figures, including one apparently of an angel. And so, and then there are some issues as to whether or not this fits into pagan tradition because I guess they made part of the altar out of concrete, which they say the pagans would never do. I just thought this was fascinating because, one, we don't know whose altar this is. Somebody put a lot of work into this. If you look at the pictures, this was not a weekend project. This wasn't something that was done probably by one person in a garage. I mean, this is a highly detailed carved altar. I don't know if it's carved or if it's just poured that way or what it is, but if you pull up the picture, you'll see it, that this was a highly detailed installation there. And one would assume if you went to all this trouble that it wasn't just a farce or something that you were creating to make a news story. I think that's one possible explanation of it, that somebody just planted this and thought, well, somebody eventually will come along and find the triangle of grass and lift it up, and then it'll be a news story, and I'll get to sit there and say, ha, look what I created. I kind of fooled everybody. That's possible. It's a lot of work for that. I think the more likely possibility, though, is that there was somebody who was actually using this for some kind of religious purposes, some kind of rites or spell casting or something else that was supposed to be taking place up on this hill, up above the historic chapel and up above Holyrood Park, and that there were possibly groups of pagans. Now, we don't know whether they were people who were royalty or that they were important people in the UK, or if maybe they were just regular old people in the UK, but there were certainly, I think, some group of people that was using this site to perform rituals, spell casting, magic, whatever they want to call it. I think that all falls under the category of devil worship myself. And it just, what are the natural consequences of having this as a component of our societies and embracing this kind of evil, embracing the horned god and evil things like that? And I think we see exactly what we get for that kind of activity. I'm Morgan Streetman, and that's the way I see it.
Thank you for listening to the Morgan Streetman Show. We hope you enjoyed what you heard, and if you did, please click like and subscribe to help us out. And remember that we recommend that you exercise your brain at least once a week.